Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 19th of October. And, well, the push higher continued, albeit the early morning had a bit of a dip. Most of the day was just up and then pretty soft going up into the close. Interesting on the DOC that we end up with a spider here where the shorts rise above, moving back towards the zero line here as midterm buyers sort of fade out. We have orange rising and short-term buyers a little bit of a dip as well. What's interesting about that is from a daily here on the NBI, we see white starting to move higher and a flattening of what was the NBI magenta. And it's at a critical point because you're just now positive shakeout. So the expectation is that you're going to need to continue that rise to get to the highs and potentially break to new ones. And this is what everyone's going to be looking for, because without new highs, start to wonder whether or not there's enough impetus to keep pushing things forward, especially as the economic potential turmoils exist, supply disruptions, higher fuel prices. These things are all going to start having their impact and weigh on the broader economy, and that will definitely affect earnings going forward. And of course, we're about to see everyone reporting starting up now, and the real question will be on those calls whether or not there's an expectation from the leaders of the business as to whether or not they expect things to be rosy or challenges ahead, and that I think is the real impetus. Now, NASDAQ a bit stronger, but similar constructs in those readings, a little bit sub-zero on that, but also you can see from an extreme histogram almost close to positive extremes, which those would tend to retrace. So kind of a precarious moment. So we may not be realizing it, particularly as we head into the later part of October, which has traditionally been problematic, though that historically has really proved out to be too much. It's been, even in bad times, positive at period, so it just depends on where things are at in the current situation from a Bitcoin standpoint. You know, after that big excitement over potential ETFs, as people start to understand more about what that ETF setup really does, may lead to a little less excitement from it. Needless to say, though, the inflationary aspects of wanting a hedge against rising prices definitely has been supportive of the push forward. A little bit less so from Ethereum, but it still broke out past that 34,000, which was a key threshold that had really been stuck for a long time. No action from the euro from that standpoint. You can see oil still pushing towards the highs, even though it sold off a little bit, and those were just because of positive extremes. But as that continues to rise, it really puts pressure on the market overall. When we look at our 50K, we had that closeout of the long setup because we ended up with the magenta spike that took place back here, and then it was just a matter of the crossover of red. Happened at the DOC spread, though, with the steel this far down. That's why it tends to be in that rose color, simply because we know that as soon as you spike above 13.5, you're going to continue forward a little bit. However, historically, when we get this kind of a peak on the magenta, and I believe right there you can see it's at 50, that tends to 4 or 5 bars later start to roll over. So we'll be watching that as we move forward in there. I can't put up where we're at with our performance report as far as the setup goes. Excellent equity graph, and you can see just under 60% win rate, right around even on the short side of it, and that's just mostly because really strong long overall setup. No complaint with that. When we look at the RINA index, which is just basically a relative comparison of how strong it is from an intraday setup. And our percentage of market, right around 65%, pretty consistent, staying in the market and capturing those. And again, there is that performance graph as it makes new equity highs following that along. And when we turn to the intraday, well, that sort of tells it. I mean, you see how small that range is. And here's where we had that fade early on during the day, stabilized. The little yellow dots ended, which meant that could return up right here, right around 48. Left it clean to rise, and as it did so, we ended up with a lot of period of cyan under red, keeping the momentum moving. So even when we had the brief pause with the magenta candles, just as we got the crossover, when you have that kind of extended run, you would expect to see that white continuing to rise, and when it didn't, that's sort of a telltale that you're going to see another move to the upside, and then just kind of held across. Now I've marked a couple of positive extreme levels that will be the first ones to get tested on any cell signal that pops in place. But all in all, good stuff, and everyone has the new update of the dots. And really effective too, because when you see that return to the dark green, which is the cyan under red, even within that magenta setup, you know you've got a potential for a decent push-up, because you're not getting any magenta from there. And even when it happened here, you're in the DOC spread, but no real spikes of anything to really drive a move significantly lower. And I tried to test it, but because you didn't get any of those white with magenta spikes, didn't happen. And then you've got one a little bit later, so that one will have a little more significance if you begin to see a spike of that white from a crossover standpoint. So that's the long and the short of it as we are right now. As always, though, I will keep updating you on the Skype chat. Trade well.